Having spent years focused on relationships and talking to thousands of people about their relationships and about how they see relationships, what I've realized is that most people have a medieval mentality about relationships. So, what I mean about this is if we look at medicine today is if we're ill, then there's a cause. There's and we spend a lot of time researching and we find scientific solutions. But back in the medieval days, we didn't really have the science for that, and we didn't really look for scientific answers. Of course, there were physicians and there was some medical science, but in terms of in relation to today, where we have pills and we have a whole medical structure. So if anything is wrong with you, you go to the doctor. In the medieval times, you might have gone to a witch or some old housewife that had all these like old wives' tales of throwing salt over your shoulder and using herbs. And some of them, of course, had some basis, but a lot of them were just random ideas. And there was a big school of thought that disease was was a curse. It was like God's punishment. And so many diseases were never cured because it was believed like the cause wasn't some scientific principle, but a curse or some random magical, when we had there was like the Witchfinder General and all the witch trials, people were believed to be sick and ill because a witch had put a curse on them. So that's the medieval mentality. Whereas today, the mentality of medicine is that there's cause, we can understand it, we can find a cure, we can have surgery, we can have pills, we can have treatment. So in relationships, when I say that we have a medieval mentality, it's because most people aren't looking for scientific principles for an understanding of the dynamics that create the relationship that they're in. Most people blame. Most people work from the fairy tale. And people don't consciously work from the fairy tale, but there is this underlying understanding of relationships, as in you meet the one, you live happily ever after. And if you don't live happily ever after, they weren't the one. And so the love wasn't true. And so people don't know where to go with that understanding. Like if you're 5 years into your relationship and you've grown apart, you suddenly bickering, you suddenly have no passion for each other, you've become friends, and there is nothing between you anymore. You don't feel any chemistry. These are all principles. There's principles underlying this. But because we haven't studied relationships in the same way that we've studied medical science, there isn't such a developed body of knowledge. And even though now there is some relationship research, it typically takes decades for a scientific principle to be understood in the mainstream. So, and when you look at psychology, psychology as an independent discipline is only 150 years old. Social psychology is much less, and the study of relationships is much, much less. So there isn't this body of knowledge. Nobody really passes it on. And so we're all operating from a medieval mentality. So I want to explain to you something that can put all relationships in context so that you can understand the dynamics of how you can change a relationship, how you can improve a relationship, and if you're not in a relationship, how you can choose the partner and how your next relationship can be better. So I want to show you something I talk about, I think about as in relationship heaven and relationship hell. So in terms of, especially in the medieval days, there was heaven and hell. And so relationship heaven is where the relationship is supportive. It's where both feel understood, both feel accepted, both feel trusting, both feel content, they feel peace, they love each other, they're happy, there's fun, there's passion. All of the things that we want from a relationship are in relationship heaven. All of the things that we don't want are in relationship hell. So going from anger to bickering to not feeling supported to feeling disrespected to feeling betrayal, cheating, abandonment, lying, all the fights about jealousy or pride, feeling shame, feeling grief after a relationship breakup, or even in a relationship, feeling guilt. All those things belong in relationship hell. And so what distinguishes a relationship that's in heaven and that's in hell? And essentially there's a line, and that line is about freedom. Relationship heaven is a relationship of freedom. It's where you're free to be yourself. It's where you're free to express yourself, you say what you feel, to be who you are. Relationship hell is about control, manipulation, and even abuse. So the key dynamic is about freedom. Now, we need to look at, there are three pillars that create relationship heaven. So the three pillars that create relationship heaven are integrity, respect, and kindness. Now, when we show up with integrity, the response from our partner is trust, because if we always do what we say we're going to do, then people learn to trust us. That's how trust is developed, because does what you do match up with what you say you were going to do? Is everything congruent? Then when you have integrity, we trust you. When there's trust, there's a climate that's fun and relaxed, that we feel free to have fun. The second pillar is respect. Now, when I show up and I'm considerate and I want to understand you and I'm curious and I want to support you, when I show up with that respect, that engenders loyalty. When we have a basis of loyalty, we don't have a basis that we can thrive and we can appreciate good things, because we're expecting good from our partner. And when we expect good things, we see good things. And so then we are more respecting, and then we're more loyal, and then we're more appreciative. And the third pillar is kindness. If I show up to give, to be generous, then that creates, we human beings are wired for reciprocity. So when you show up being kind and generous, I want to understand you. I want to be compassionate to you. I want to be empathic to you. When we have that response, we feel safe to communicate openly and honestly. We feel safe to be ourselves. And so all of these are positive spirals, virtuous circles that support. You see, people often complain about, yeah, we've been in a relationship 10 years, we've just grown apart, we're just friends now, or they're not the person that I married, they're someone completely different. Well, what that's really about is that people are like onions. And when you understand that there's lots of different layers, there's always more layers to that person. And when you understand how hard self-awareness is, when you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, probably even 80, there's things that you find out and you know about yourself that you didn't know in those years, because there's so much to all of us and we're all constantly changing. We're not going to be the same person. So to assume that after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, that you know the person, is to stop unpeeling these layers. It's arrogant, it's presumptive, and that it's the opposite to what life is. Life is a revealing and a curiosity about what's unfolding. And so when we don't have that curiosity, when we don't have that interest, then we just assume that person is just this fixed box of no more interest to us. Oh, let's go and find out about someone else. And so that is what kills passion. That's what stops us developing a richer relationship. So there's a spectrum. And when we don't have integrity, we have deceit. And when we show up with deceit, our partner has doubt about us. Because if we don't have integrity, there's the person we are and the person we say we are. Who are we in that relationship with? And so that creates doubt that you never know which person someone is. And that creates an environment of anxiety. And so people are constantly on edge. The opposite of respect is contempt. And when I'm contemptuous of you, you're either going to be defensive or you're going to stonewall. Now, stonewalling is something is typically men do. It's about 80% men. And it's basically, they just completely shut down. You can say anything and it doesn't seem to register. And people assume that means that they just don't care. Look, they just don't care. They couldn't care less. Actually, what science tells us is they're actually flooded with emotion that they can't cope with. And so they either shut down, so just to completely shut the world out, or they become violent because they can't cope with what they feel. And so when you do that, it creates a climate of hostility. And so it's the complete opposite of respect. It's rather than appreciate the person, you just find all their faults. And so that becomes a negative spiral. So the opposite of kindness is criticism. It's where we judge someone and find them wanting. And when we judge someone and when we're critical of them, that creates a defensiveness. And it's a sense of most people don't deal with criticism very well. And it takes a high degree of humility and being able and security in yourself to be able to take someone's criticism and not make it personal. And so what people do is they create this barrier of defensiveness. It wasn't me, oh, because of this. And that's where couples get into these rows that are really rows that are about something ridiculous, but it's really about, I can't be wrong. And so it's a fighting for, I'm going to fight for this, even if it at any cost, so that I'm not wrong. And so what happens then is there's a climate where people don't feel safe to be themselves. And so there's poor or no communication. And so what happens in relationship hell is it just spirals down to be a worse and worse relationship. All of us are capable of being at our best and at our worst. And so there's a scale of integrity to deceit. And at our best, we have integrity, which is supported by a base of honesty and ethics. And at our worst, we have deceit, which is on a base of dishonesty and pragmatism. And then there is respect to contempt. And respect is built on understanding and empathy, where contempt is built on judgment and apathy. And then there's a scale from kindness to criticism. And kindness is built on consideration and generosity, whereas criticism is built on thoughtlessness and selfishness. So I want to give you a 3-step secret to creating a relationship that's where you live in relationship heaven. And so that 3-step secret is, number 1, you have to be at your best. You have to feel at your best in order to be at your best. And number 2, your partner has to be at their best. So they have to feel at their best to be at their best. And number 3, the relationship has to be structured to have the structure and the climate to enable both of you to thrive. The whole purpose of a relationship is it should enhance your life, because that's what we get into a relationship. We don't get into a relationship so that we're less happy. So I want to give you 3 questions to help you be at your best. And these are really deep self-awareness. So question number 1 is, what makes you come alive? Number 2 is, what environments, around what people do you thrive? And number 3 is, where and around what people, what environments do you shrivel, become less than? And so I want to give you 3 questions to use in choosing your partner. And you see, most people get into relationships for the most superficial reasons, because they're swiping in someone's heart, because they're solvent, because they have a good sense of humor, because they're not like their ex. And so 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, someone looks at their partner and like, you're not, I can never be happy with you. And that's heartbreaking. So these are the 3 questions that you need to ask before you commit to a partner. And that is, number 1, what do you need from a partner in order to thrive in a relationship? So number 2, what qualities must a partner have in order for you to thrive in a relationship? And number 3, do you have the qualities and the willingness to enable them to thrive in the relationship? Because everything that you have and aspire to and you want, they have to also as well. Because a relationship that only works for one person is ultimately doomed, because the other person, what do they get from it? And so they're going to eventually either leave or gradually give less and less until the relationship collapses. And finally, there's one question to build a relationship. Will these thoughts that I'm thinking, the words that I'm saying, or the action that I'm doing help my partner to thrive? Because ultimately, what determines our relationship is, am I supporting my partner and pushing them above the line, or am I pushing them down? So relationships that are made, relationships that people try to force, people try to make work, they're based in control. They're often based in control, and they're often based in manipulation. And that is the defining characteristic of relationship hell. Relationships are built on 3 things. Self-mastery, because so many relationships just look at the relationship techniques, and they look at how do you change someone? How do you get a result? At best, that's soulless and limited. And at worst, it's manipulative and controlling. So you have to be the person that's above the line and show up in that way. And secondly, you need to choose a partner that's willing and capable of being above the line. Now, people are never always none of us are always above the line. We generally fluctuate, but it's about the wanting to be above the line, caring enough to push you over the line, and being committed to that journey. And then the final one is relational mastery. How do you build the structure and the climate so that you live that above the line relationship, and you create that relationship heaven?